Oh. Okay, hi, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's good. This is the Demotivator show with the Demotivator and Lady Chelsea, which is me. Sorry for being a bit late due to technical difficulties again. Demotivator will be here shortly. I hope everyone's good. Seems like it'll be a nice day today. It's bright and apparently it'll be hot in a couple of days. So hopefully people have some time to just soak up the sun before it gets to winter, because I know it's very soon. Just as Demotivate does, I just want to thank everybody who helps put this show and whole Galaxy FM together. The technicians, presenters, the guests that come in and give their time to us to talk to us today and the past weeks. So what I'm going to do is do the health messages. Start off with, it's important to think about what you eat. As Samantha always says, no fat. No fat. Fat is not good. He likes to give the example of meat, not having any of the white thick meat on our meat, and try to take it off and not eat it, as apparently he said this doesn't help with flavor at all. So yeah, there's with that. Keep having your fruit and drink. Oh, okay, sorry. Keep having your fruit and veg daily. 5 a day is what I believe is recommended. Also your water, and I have a lot of water, and I'm trying to start exercising, but I have like 2 to 3 liters of water. And as he said, talk to a professional doctor or nutritionist if you have that, and see what's recommended for you. But I think the general recommendation is 2 to 3 liters of water. And exercise. Exercise is, I know everyone finds it difficult to find time to exercise. Oh, hello, this might be somebody. No, okay. To exercise. Hello. To exercise.
You're very well. Come on.
Great. I think try to exercise, 3 to 4 times a week, maybe half an hour, depending on your age, maybe. What else? Your mental and spiritual well-being. It's good to always talk to someone. Professional is always helpful, I've found, but if you can't or don't feel comfortable doing that, family members and friends, hopefully you have a good support system where that would be helpful to talk and release how you feel.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, the engineer speaking. Oh, there we are. We're always controlled in the hands of our engineers. Good morning, engineer.
We're going to be ready in 30 seconds.
Excellent. We are live on Facebook and YouTube currently, so it's all good. We'll be on digital radio soon. The engineer has spoken. Yes. Go on, Lady Chelsea.
I kind of finished my bit.
You're doing so well. Huh?
Oh, no. It was okay. Trying to remember what you say in the morning.
Well, much of it is just common sense, though, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Think about the amount of sugar you ingest, and it accumulates over time. Think about the amount of salt you ingest, because it accumulates over time. Think about the amount of fat you take into your body, because it accumulates over time. Ensuring you drink enough water. Average person needs around 2 to 3 liters of water per day. Yeah, it's common sense, really. And of course, remembering wherever possible to eat as much as you can fruits and vegetables, and to keep meat in moderation. It's common sense, isn't it, Lady Chelsea?
Yeah, I believe so.
There you are. And these are simple messages, but it's amazing how we all, I have to admit, in latter days, I've been guilty of it, where I have not considered the long-term implications of consuming excessive amount of sugars, salt, and fat. Yeah, because it's so easy for us to ingest, particularly us who live here in these metropolitan areas. Very easy for us to ingest. And of course, in our own community, as Professor Hilary Beckles, the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, recently announced that amongst our populations, we have abnormally high levels of hypertension, in other words, high blood pressure, and of course, diabetes. Okay, and these are essentially lifestyle diseases. So I do believe it's incumbent upon those of us in sort of public arenas to continue to remind people that your health is your wealth. There you are, yeah? And of course, most critically, I know you're about to get on to, exercise is a vital part of your general health and well-being. Allowing your heart to race is a natural part of who we are as human beings, yeah? Stretching those muscles, flexing those muscles are an integral part of who we are. That's why we give out these health messages. Because much of the pain and the anxiety and the depression that we're experiencing is avoidable if we adopt healthy, wholesome lifestyles. There you are. And I think, as I said, you were doing it extremely well, reminding people that these messages are not simply to patronize anyone. They're not intended to tell you, you must do this, but to remind you what is good for you. Because this is what the experts say, and all the evidence suggests that the simple messages we've given just now are sound and have proven the test of time. Okay? Well done, Lady Chelsea.
Thank you.
That's good. I appreciate you. And we both should also give praise, of course, to the Galaxy management. The Galaxy management has ensured that this station has continued for more than 30 years. I believe almost 35 years, but let's say 30 years, okay? And that is a testament to determination, to allegiance to a vision that it's important for our community to own platforms, media, information platforms, that we are in total control. Okay, that we adapt to the prevailing technologies that allows us to maximize the audience profiles. Yeah, so I want to give praise to the Galaxy Management Chief Pacumba, that visionary leader, Elder Eric Kuti, Abu Ratata, and of course the Solutions Empress, Shanice. Let's give praise to Sister Shanice, always a solution-determined person. I give praise to her, and of course Nickel, the most royal, one of those stalwarts in the community who I understand is the longest serving pilot on the station. Okay, Nickel, the most royal. I give praise to you, but never forgetting, of course, what our previous guest Ndidi Ishewa would have testified. That is not Africa's natural wealth, where the natural resources, that the wealth is to be found. Yeah, it is actually the technologies that derive from those wealth. So the coal, the cobalt, the iron ore. Yeah, if they make products that Africa then subsequently buy at a much higher price. That's where the wealth is, and indeed this station has survived because we adapt to the new technologies, and much of the raw material comes from Africa, but the new technologies that allows us now to not only transmit via digital radio, via galaxyafewi.com, and you can find Galaxy, of course, via Zeno Radio, those of you who are listening, but of course we're now live or via Facebook under The Motivator Show, and of course YouTube under The Motivator Show. Okay, or you want to use your search engine, put in DE space Motivator Show plus sign YouTube. It'll go directly to the home page. You can see us live. Not only can you see us, you can hear us. Well, digital radio is simply audio, of course. Yeah, really good. And of course, if you're on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like us. Yeah? Not only to like us, follow us. Say subscribe to us so that we send you notifications of each show as we put them together. Okay, and I know this show is going to be really an interesting show because, of course, we'll talk about the history of our peoples here in London. Okay, that will be really fascinating. I know that Lady Chelsea will get your background, but what really is important that this show should prove to be not only informative, it should prove to be inspiring. Yeah, to inspire people into action. Remember, translate words into action. Enough of always passive listening and receiving information. We need to do things, yeah? We need to be assertive, you know? We need to articulate what we really feel, what we really want. Not only amongst ourselves, but amongst those people who make decisions on our behalf. Yeah? That's why we do these shows, to inform the community of the great works that's happening within our community. And, you know, and I'm reminded of the more recent past shows, which I believe are a testament to the robustness that is our community. I want to remind ourselves of the consultation exercises that takes place here in London, particularly in the London Borough of Southwark. And again, congratulate Councillor Catherine Rose and Clement, the lead officer, for presenting here and encouraging local people, because we had quite a few local people calling up on that particular morning, calling up and following through with their words. They didn't simply ring this station and talk about the issue. They actually followed through to the website. Yeah? And their views have been taken into account when considering how a local authority create environments that are wholesome, safe for you to occupy. In other words, you should be able to walk along the street, not worry about the air quality. In other words, you should be able to cross the road and not be overly concerned that there are far too many cars, and therefore it's unsafe for you and your most vulnerable family. In other words, how your immediate locality, your neighborhood looks, you have a say in what it should look like. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the purpose of that program. And I understand, as a result of the program, significant numbers of members of our community who are typically referred to being so-called hard-to-reach community, okay, have in fact responded to the questionnaires. Okay, so I want to give praise to both those two colleagues from Southwark, to the councillor and lead officer who are involved in what we call the low emission neighbourhood initiatives. Okay, I should also, of course, just remind our listeners about an earlier show. Do you remember that remarkable sister? You know I'm going to say, don't you? Huh?
I think so.
Who? Oh, you remember Selena Carty, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
The founder of the Black Poppy Rose campaign, you know? Wow, what a remarkable sister, okay? What a remarkable person, yeah? And what she recognized, of course, is what we all knew, of course, is that the contributions of African peoples, either from the continent of Africa or indeed from the Caribbean, was not being recognized here in Britain. Okay? And of course, we know just a few months earlier, the Imperial War Graves Commission noted that for more than 60 years, on the British monuments, our heroes and heroines were omitted from the British monuments. Yeah? And this great and remarkable agency admitted that it was pervasive racism. Yeah? And there's some shame being expressed. You know? Quite remarkable agency. Because, of course, the Metropolitan Police here in London had been identified as being institutionally racist. So it's another variation on the same theme. Yeah, on the same theme. But I want to give praise to that commission and their courage without the need for an official inquiry to take place at great expense to the public purse, to admit it was simply pervasive racism. So consequently, many of those heroes and heroines were omitted, but now they're taking steps to overcome that omission and recognize the hundreds of thousands of African women and men who participated in the 2 world wars, and indeed those who are our fallen heroines and heroes. Okay, I want to give praise to her. I want to give praise to the War Graves Commission, and I hope all goes well for them in the future. But of course, the Black Poppy Rose campaign continues every year to ensure that African ex-servicemen from the continent, or indeed from the Caribbean, in their closing twilight years, are able to live out those twilight years in dignity. So I say to people, give generously to the Black Poppy Rose campaign. Okay, if you put that in your search engine, it'll go directly to the website. So I'll give praise to Selina Carty, a remarkable woman. As I always say, watch the women, watch the women, watch the women. You know, you always put us men. Would it be right at this point, Lady Chelsea, also to remind listeners about the remarkable practitioner we had here a couple of weeks ago, Joan Green, of the Brighter Tuition website. Okay, her book had been formally launched. I attended the book launch. It was online. I want to give praise to her, Sister Joan Green, a teacher extraordinaire, producing materials for our sons and daughters. We hope and pray that she will continue to go from strength to strength. And also, of course, remembering the other person that was present in that particular session, Brother Near, of the National Association of Black Supplementary Schools, is call out, of course, that those schools who are in existence make contact with the National Association of Black Supplementary Schools, or I think the term EU was NABS. NABS, there you are. But in there, I'll give you another shout out. National Association of Black Supplementary Schools. Those supplementary schools who are listening today, right now, if you're not already quoted on that website, please, I wish to positively encourage you. Check your details, ensure there are current details. In other words, there's a clearinghouse for all the supplementary or Saturday schools that we run throughout the United Kingdom, throughout Britain, are quoted in that website. Okay? So I look forward to great things from the National Association of Black Supplementary Schools, because they have already contributed positively to transform the life chances of tens of thousands of boys and girls who otherwise may well have found themselves in problems in our schools, So I want to give praise to him, and I look forward to having returned to talk about progression since we last met. And indeed, Sister Joan Green, that teacher, practitioner extraordinaire, I look forward to speaking to her again. Okay, so I think they were important contributors to our more recent shows. Okay, and very recently I had the opportunity to speak to Nir Morat. You might remember him discussing South Sudan. I believe we should have him back again just to note progression in the South Sudan. Okay, now of course, it's so important that we continue to think about what these contributors to our communities are doing, and we give them our support. These are ordinary people engaged in extraordinary work, honest work, meaningful work. We should give them our support. What do you think, Lady?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I think so important, so important. Now, of course, as we think about those more recent contributors, we need to also think about future shows and how we continue to develop this particular themes that we've developed over these past months. Okay? And I'm very conscious that black people, African peoples, have been in Britain not for 100 years, not for 200 years or 400 years, or even 800 years. We've been in Britain for thousands of years. Indeed, the earliest known Britain, the skeleton of the earliest known Britain, and I think I may have said this to you previously, they generally refer to as so-called Cheddar Man, okay, found in a location, I believe, in Devon, okay. The earliest known skeletons of an earliest Britain, it wasn't called Britain, of course, then, is of an African man. Now, I know that the academics who made that revelation, okay, would have experienced intense resistance by those on top who wouldn't want the general populace to be aware of this, okay? But if in doubt, I say to you, Google it. You know, use your own search engine, you know?
Yeah.
It's an academic research, you know? They're brave enough, courageous enough to admit the truth and not go with this narrative that Africans have not contributed to this part of Asia. There you go, right? So I give praise to the academics involved in that research and were capable of telling the truth. Okay? That's it, you know, that's pretty powerful stuff, I have to tell you. But anyway, let me pause there because we're going to continue this theme of the African contribution to British life. But Lady Chelsea, I'm going to hand over to you. Let's give promotion to young Malachi and that wonderful book of his. Go on, over to you, Lady Chelsea.
Yeah, that's fine. So yes, this part is the children's part, and this is promoting young Malachi's book, which is called Tutankhamun, The Tale of the Adventurous Boy King. And this is part of the prize for answering one of the questions correctly. It's a book that he wrote when he was 14 years old, and I believe you can buy it on Amazon still. I think it's about $14.99, something like that. But it's the prize, and this competition is for the children. So we have a question for the under 10s and 11 to 16-year-olds. So I'll just give out the number first, so everyone's prepared, and then I'll do the questions. Okay, so the number is 020 348 152 40. Then you'll be asked for a PIN number, which is 3707 33 43 97, followed by the hash key sign. So I'll just start off with the first question. So this is loud. So this question
We're
is
going to hear his
for...
voice, are we? Yeah, we've got to hear, young Malachi's voice, huh? Okay.
It was good, all the way up. Okay, so this is question 1. This is for the under 10s.
Question 1. How do you spell Tutankhamun?
That's how do you spell Tutankhamun?
Okay. How do you spell Tutankhamun? Right, okay.
And the second question for 11 to 16-year-olds.
Question 9. Who or what did the people of Kemet worship during the time of Tutankhamun?
That's who or what did the people of Kemet worship at the time of Tutankhamun?
Okay. All right. So, be interested to see, because it's these are interesting questions, and if there's a deficit or some new listeners are having some difficulty, that's because of the British education system, you know, not incorporating African history in a way that ensures it is seen as being significant to British history. you know. And therefore, I'm going to give support to a previous guest we had here, of course, Tony Sewell. Okay, an interesting report, but the recommendations of the report including African, or if some people like to say, Black history in the national curriculum. So Sister Sigmund, Malachi's mother, of course, saw it as her duty to ensure that her son was taught Black, or indeed African history. Okay, and indeed she home tutored him. So Malachi displayed a high degree of social maturity, academic adeptness. He displayed a maturity often not seen of young boys of that age, you know. And I notice you recall, you know, I should really play back at future time, how he looked straight into her eyes as she spoke to us on that occasion. She represented his world, you know. He believed in her, yeah, and the love was most evident, you know. And when you engage boys, indeed girls, and you as a parent are respected. You don't need to raise your voice, don't need to inflict violence on your sons or daughters. If they have, you know, if you've earned their love, their respect, their admiration, they'll hang on to every word that you say. There'll be no conflict because the love and respect, admiration for you will supersede any sort of childishness that might be, you know, quite reasonable for someone that age. But he displayed none of that. He displayed a maturity beyond generally that I see in a 14-year-old boy, as he was at that time. So I want to give a big shout out to his mother, Sister Segment. I give a big shout out to you and say, well done, well done. I know it's difficult bringing up children. I know it's difficult. I've had a few myself, you know. I know it's difficult. But with love and determination, patience and you know, a bit of maturity on the parents' part. Yeah? Children respond positively every time. Every time. Every time. A big shout out to you, Sister Segment, Malachi's mother. Can I just ask you, Lady Cho, just to repeat those questions? Then when you've done that, I'll give out the number again. In fact, I'll give it the number now, and then you just repeat those questions using Malachi's voice. So the number to call, parents and young people. If you're from 16 to 11, there's a question, and if indeed from 10 downwards, there's another question for you. The number to call, it's 0203 481 5240. And you're asked to enter a PIN number 3707 33 43 97, followed by the ash sign. I'm going to do it, Lady Chelsea. That's the vertical and horizontal line on your keypad. Okay. Lady Chelsea, over to you. Over to you.
Okay. Yeah. So again, it's the first question. This is for under 10s.
Question 1. How do you spell Tutankhamun?
How do you spell Tutankhamun? And 11 to 16-year-olds.
Question 9. Who or what did the people of Kemet worship during the time of Tutankhamun?
So who or what did the people of Kemet worship at the time of Tutankhamun?
Very good. Okay, so I'm going to give parents. We should give parents the opportunity to call at any point between now and the close of this program. And so you know, I know some say, "Oh, it's a bit early," but you know, the fact you're listening means it's not too early, and you can call, and we promise not to bite. Okay. It's all good though. It's all good. So let us just, if I may, just continue with this theme on our contribution, African people's contribution to British society. And I have to say, Lady Chelsea, I was queried this week. Why do I say African people? And I say African peoples with a K and not a C. And that was an interesting challenge to me. I said, well, look, if an English person goes to Jamaica, they don't say, I'm a white person from Asia, because this is where we are now, yeah? They say, no, I'm English. Wouldn't they, huh?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
No.
If a German person goes to the United States of America, he or she doesn't say, oh, I'm a white person from Europe. That's who I am. They say, I'm German. Yeah? Okay. Or they'll say, I'm European. And the same apply to the Spanish, the Dutch, the Italians, the Greeks, Scandinavians, and so on. So why is it wherever we are, we refer to our colour, which doesn't, and colour is used often in this cultural context as a political statement. Whereas when actually we are of African heritage, Yeah. I know in your case, mixed heritage, but we're of African heritage. You don't say, well, black heritage now, do you? We say we're of African heritage, and you know, therefore, that my ancestors, our ancestors, came from Africa or from the Caribbean. It's a much better descriptor. And why with a K? Because the Ka, the part of our ancestral belief system, the Ka, has power. Even when you say it, Ka, it has power. And I won't go into details now. I'm going to get a previous guest, Brother Dadion. You may remember him, our spiritualist, herbalist. I'm going to get him to come along. And we need to talk about it with even greater gusto, I believe. But important. But nevertheless, let's keep on the theme of African people's contribution to British society. Okay. Now, of course, as you know, at this point, I then start thinking about the monarchy. Okay. I do believe the monarchy has a lot to answer for in relation to African peoples. Very often, it's the monarch that sets the tone, of a public discourse. So it's important, I believe, that the monarch give recognition to the African contribution to British society and expresses appreciation, admiration, and appreciation for such. Unless the monarch makes these statements, this is viewed as being kind of left-wing propaganda, as it were, Do you see? But actually, of course, the earliest known Briton looked like me. Isn't that remarkable? Audience, isn't that remarkable? But it's only remarkable because of the way in which we've all been taught. What is British history? And so it has effectively been whitewashed. And that's all part of Britain's imperial past. The desire to dominate and control millions of peoples across the world. And therefore you've got to elevate yourself and create the idea that to be white is to be almost saintly. If you say a white lie, it's not so bad. It's a black lie. Do you see? If you're in China, they would associate white with, death, Do you see?
Okay.
Do you see what I mean? The cultural differences, So it's all propaganda. This is but propaganda. But in some cases, it's quite malicious propaganda. So what you and I were never taught in a British school are the contributions Africans made to the Elizabethan and Tudor times, you know. We were never taught this, you know. We were never taught of these great laureates, Shakespeare and others, who cite Africans in those periods, okay, and refer to them in sort of general forms, but not say this is an African person that they're referring to.
Yeah.
Not to upset the elite, the monarchs, do you see? And that's still the prevailing attitude in Britain today, unfortunately. Okay. But we hope that the guests we have today will begin the process of filling in those obvious gaps. It does seem quite remarkable, even when you begin to think about it. And I know that some people might continue to challenge when this is said, because the early education, the propaganda they've been exposed to. If the earliest human artifacts, not skeletons, are to be found in Africa, that implies civilization was to be found in Africa. Okay?
Yeah.
If the earliest manuscripts, written materials, okay, I don't mean paper or papyrus, but usually in stones, are to be found in Africa, yeah, it again implies civilization is founded in Africa. Okay, if the linguists tell us that they can see the connections of all the languages and it goes back to Africa, again it implies that there is something coming out of Africa that is profound. Yeah. If the earliest astronomers, yeah, earliest mathematicians, yeah, you then trace it all back to Africa, and indeed the earliest known doctors who are currently referred to by doctors today, are to be found to have African heritage. Never mind what the Greeks are saying. Remember, the Greeks had to go to Egypt and further south in Africa to be taught. And then they translated, changed the names so it's more acceptable to the Greeks. Yeah. Do you see? So these great gods you see in the marbles, explanations, Thor and others, are hitherto African deities. Yeah. And I don't say that just to big up myself.
Yeah, no.
This is what the academics are telling us.
Yeah, it's the same story.
But I realise it goes against the prevailing, what has been the prevailing propaganda. Okay.
Yeah.
And it is a challenge, of course, because I know there are English people who listen and said, "Oh no, that can't be true. Oh no, that can't be true. Oh no, the academics, their own academics must have got it wrong. You know, oh, that can't be true." Until, of course, you look at the genetics. And you can therefore argue that all human beings across the world are essentially African. Because you can trace it through the genetics. Again, not me bigging up myself, you know. So we Africans have got a lot to be proud of. Our contribution to human civilization. And a desire that there should be equality for all, you know. I don't say any of this for doing any maliciousness or anything like that, you know, because we've got to display a degree of social maturity. And we definitely know the current course the world is on, you know, with the disparity between rich and poor. Some people are dying for lack of clean water, can you imagine, in the 21st century, a century in which we can feed us all 2 or 3 times over, but yet there are some people needing clean water and food. Can you imagine? Now, would we do any better if we were the leading civilization in the world? I hope so.
I'd like to think.
You know, I hope so. You know, I hope so. Because in African tradition, you know, it takes a whole village to raise a child. In African tradition, the sharing of food, sharing what you have, is taken as a given, because it is illogical to allow your neighbours to starve.
Yeah.
It's illogical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Completely logical. We know intuitively it's illogical. Here, even in this country of Britain, there are some people starving.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very much
it
so.
is illogical. We as a species, because there's no such thing as race, remember? There's no such thing as race. That's a German concept designed to split people up, you know? We are but one species. Why are we one species? Because I'm no longer a young man, okay? But I could marry and have children with a woman from China, couldn't I? India, couldn't I? Yeah?
Yeah.
Scandinavia, couldn't I? Yeah? Or a Native American, couldn't I? Yeah. It's because we are all from one family. We're part of the human species. We're one species. An important message to communicate, because often, as you remember the propaganda we've all been exposed to, somehow there's a separation. Yeah? We've got to counter that, because that goes against the interest of the human family. There should not be people who are dying for lack of clean water or food. There should not be. And that's a stain on the human family. Yeah? I'm sure an alien coming in and observing us would shake their heads in wonderment and say, wow, why would the species do that to themselves? The diversity that we see amongst us in terms of height, girth, level of melanin in our skins are all part of our adaptation to our world. Yeah? Yeah? The slight differences in our immunoresponse to diseases and viruses, you know, are all part of our defense system so we can survive on this planet. Yeah? A species that doesn't have those slight variations is a species that's likely to die. In other words, if we all cloned of each other and a disease, a fatal disease hits one, it would hit us all. Yeah? So all species, regardless of who you are, have slight differences so that you can survive potentially fatal maladies. So the fact that we have different shades of skin is simply a local adaptation. We still remain 99.999999% the same.
Yeah.
True, isn't it? Yeah, true. And that is the remarkable part of this. So let's go back to Britain, you know, and let's call it by the general international term, Great Britain. Yeah, let's just call it that, because of course, Great Britain didn't become great because of one ethnic group. Remember, Britain is a series of nations, okay, which include the English, of course, the Welsh, the Scotch, the Irish, and others, of course, including ourselves as African peoples. No? This is what makes up Great Britain. Why great? Because, of course, their imperial past, you know. But the history of Britain, from an African perspective, is very rarely told. Okay, and we hope that our speaker today, S.I. Martin, or indeed Steve Martin, a internationally renowned historian, yeah, is someone who can fill in those gaps for us. Okay, that which we were not taught at school. Let's talk about the local history here in London, and we go beyond London thereafter. But this would be an excellent opportunity for us to bridge those gaps in our knowledge. Okay, so I believe we might have Steve Martin present. Are you with us, Steve? Are you with us?
Yeah, I should be. For some reason, I'm imagining I'm audible but invisible.
Oh, yes, I see that. You've got something over your camera. There you are. You've got something over your camera. Look at this. Looks like you should be visible to us at the moment, but you're not. Do you want to log off and log back in again, just to see if that makes a difference? It'd be nice to see you, you see.
Yeah, let me do this.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I vanish.
Okay, you know, he's an international historian of great repute, and we'll be given the opportunity to ask those questions about the African part of that which makes Great Britain. Okay, and behind us, of course, we've got evidence of Africans wearing sort of, I believe, Tudor clothing. Okay, you know, it's I don't know these persons' names, but it seemed a good backdrop for us because they have been a part. They are a part of British history. And I'll say to those English, Scotch, Welsh, and Irish people who are listening, they are an integral part. Oh, there you are, with the man himself. Good morning to you. Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How are you feeling this morning, there, Steve? How are you feeling this morning?
I live. It's Saturday morning.
Oh, come on now. I'm sure you're up at 6. You were doing your exercises. When you were listening to doing your exercise at that time in the morning, though?
That's not me on
No,
Saturday
that's
morning.
okay. I'm the same. It's okay. It's just,
All righty. All right. Look, Steve, first of all, thank you for accepting our offer to attend today. And you may have heard I've started the intro on I use the term African. You can use black, use the term interchangeably. Okay, history to British, it's a contribution to British history. Okay,
Yeah.
and of course, we are currently here in South London. Okay, in fact, in Southwark, in South London. Okay, and I'm aware that there are some notable contributors to this local history in this part of London that many South Londoners, and including myself until recently, were totally unaware. Okay, so before I go to that question, you might just want to tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all, because I've described you being historian of international repute.
Oh, bless you, Martin. I've slipped into this field almost accidentally.
Okay.
I mean, I started off as a journalist, a writer, and I wrote a book published in 96, Incomparable World, which was set in the London of the 1780s, the mid-1780s, 86, 87. And it was looking at the Black population, some members of the Black population. It's a fictionalized account of some of their lives and experiences, because I always wondered, how come we never speak about Black histories? When I say we, I'm talking about we in the sense of people of African origin. We never really take that on board. The multiple histories, the diverse histories of people like us in, before 1948, say. One of my things is we always conflate, again, we always see ourselves as being modern, people of the now, people who are fashionable. We're in the very near future, on the cutting edge, or we've just arrived. But we don't see ourselves in the past or in the future. That's just not a thing. So I wanted to really look at that part of history, and the book came out. It did okay. And after that, because of the research involved in doing that, I ended up being invited to do other sort of research projects, archive projects, and that's really become my life. A lot of my work is with archives, it's with collections, it's looking at the way that we use archives across the board in this country. It's just one of the hidden gems of the heritage industry is archives, looking at collections, what things are that speak to these histories that we don't engage with for whatever reason. We might get into that, and why we should really be using them, and why it's just this untapped resource. So yeah, I do loads of work with museums, archives, schools, universities. It's my life.
Thank you for that. And as I said, I found you through a number of routes, as you know, and I queried. A library has just been opened up in my ward,
Yes.
And it is called the Walworth Library and Heritage Centre. And within that library, of course, there are African artifacts, because it includes the old Cumin Museum, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. I was looking around for the launch. I assumed would include. I was told at least some time ago that it would include local historians, particularly for those of African heritage. So I was looking around for you. I was surprised I didn't see you. Okay. Which is why I queried, well, where are you? I mean, I won't go through that now, but nevertheless, that will not happen again. Why we need political involvement in those areas where we reside. Right, okay. So that will not happen again, and you're more than welcome to come back to our local library. Anyway, let me continue. So my earlier question to you, can you maybe just summarise for us very quickly contributions of notable black people, particularly here in South London, that myself as a public elected official should be aware, and I could refer to my speeches even. And the young people can also refer to, hopefully they can Google the information, and refer to that, yes, we were here 100, 200, 400, 500 or longer years ago. Please, go ahead.
Yeah, easily. Now, the thing about Southwark is it's one of these beautiful chunks, accidental chunks of London, which offer up just multiple histories. And they offer challenging histories as well, which is more important than just, because I don't just write about kings and queens and glorious people. I think the beauty, the magic of life is in ordinary people who survived. Yes. But there is this hunger, this need, that we nourish, we harbor for the glory, the fantastic. So amongst those who would have, been more notable, we've got, for example, everyone from Marcus Garvey. Yes. He was there in Borough High Street.
Really?
He lived in Borough High Street, and that's where he was living in 1913 when he was doing all sorts of things, which I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to get into that. It upsets a lot of people because, he is a hero and, he's more real than Jesus to many people. Actually, he should be more real than Jesus, to be frank with you. But
before you continue, I want to make sure I've got that. So Marcus Garvey lived in Borough High Street here in Southwark.
Yeah, he had two addresses. One is on the site of the Overseas Visitors Registration place, which is just down from the court, on the same side as the court.
Yes.
Then you go further towards the river, towards the site of the Lloyd's Bank.
Okay.
Just by the traffic lights, that junction. And he was living at the Argosy Hotel there. Wow. And what he was doing there was, like many people that I come across over hundreds of years, centuries, he had come to Britain in order to engage with the empire, to engage with his own identity as well, how he as a politically active being could just come to grips with it and find his own way of tackling it. And of course, that's what he found. I mean, I could talk about this forever, but, he was working briefly at the African Times and Orient Review, which was the largest global Black publication in 1913 at number 158 Fleet Street. There's so many stories within stories, but Garvey was there and he's visiting the British Library. You got Mary, how much time have you got? Because it's a long list.
We've got an hour.
Okay, let me just give you a handful of people.
Yes, please.
Then you've got Mary Seacole. Again, another very, very controversial figure. And the reason why I'm against hero worship is that it stops us really engaging, with ourselves, our own humanity, when we see these people as these wonderful, mystical, magical healers and prophetesses and gods and goddesses. No, she was a very interesting person who, amazingly, at the age of 50, made her own way across the Atlantic to this country. She'd been here a few times before as well, which has been spoken about, but she made her way across to look after her boys. That's the legend. But she
Oh.
was really here because she was a business person.
Yes.
She was an incredible business person. And what's it? 1881, she dies, leaving £2,500 in 1881 money.
And where did she live when she was in London?
Oh, she had a couple of addresses. One in Soho Square, where there's a English Heritage Blue plaque.
Okay.
There's another address in Southampton Street in Covent Garden.
Right.
But the other connection is that she was performing at the Royal Surrey Gardens. That's where Paisley Park, parts of it were where Paisley Park.
Oh,
yeah.
right.
So she was performing there. No, she wasn't. There was a 4-day pageant for her in the summer of 1857, because after the Crimean War, where she had been old Mother Seacole, this sort of mammified nurse that everyone loves and knows, she was actually a businesswoman. We always forget that. But after the war, she was bankrupt, and she ended up having this pageant put on for her in order, basically, to as a fundraiser. And it was the biggest public event of the year, the most high profile, the event with the most high profile attendees of that year, members of the Lords, the Commons, everybody knew who she was. But the thing is, she's sort of interesting because how is she so appealing in 1857? How is she so appealing today? What is it about her that entitles her to this eminence? What is it about us that looks for the heroic within her? I know there is the heroic in her. She was a business person. She was courageous. She had a good sense of humor. But there's also questionable things. And I think getting into the real details of people's lives are more interesting than just like singing hallelujah.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Fascinating. Give us another personality.
Oh, yeah. You're going to like this one.
I've been shocked already.
You're going to like this one, Martin. William Davidson.
William Davidson.
William Davidson. He was the illegitimate son of the Attorney General of Jamaica. So therefore, he's a mixed background. His father white, his mother non-white. We don't know her status, but it's likely that she was enslaved. However, he is sent out of Jamaica at the age of 14 to study mathematics. He's sent to this country, and he's sent to Glasgow, I believe, to study mathematics. He didn't tarry long with his books. He ended up going to sea. So he is a seaman, like a lot of the characters I'm interested in. He is a seaman.
Right.
Long story short, he is in Britain at the time of the beginnings of working class organizations, collective bargaining, combination acts, and basically the beginnings of the labor movement. And he joins up with a revolutionary group, which was known as the Cato Street Conspiracy. The Cato Street Conspiracy wanted basically to blow up the house, the cabinets, to execute them, to murder them, as they sat to dinner at Lord Harrowby's house in Grosvenor Square. And what they wanted to do, but once they'd blown the cabinet, once they'd murdered the entire cabinet, that was a signal for the poor of London and England to rise up and take over. Now, that didn't happen because the movement was infiltrated by turncoats, andiques, and all sorts of collaborators. And long story short, Davidson was sentenced to be murdered. He's sentenced to be publicly murdered, executed, just outside what's now the Old Bailey. So what's interesting about him is that he was living in Southwark. What's the road? I hate using these landmarks. McDonald's on the Walworth Road.
I know what you mean.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, Cater Street. Cater Street.
No. On the McDonald's on the Walworth Road.
Yes.
I think it's Manor Place.
Manor Place, Manor Place, yes.
Right, so he was living there. And he was also at the not working, but present as a Sunday school teacher at the Methodist Church on the Walworth Road. It's on the same site as the present Methodist Church, but he had to leave. He had to leave there because there were accusations leveled against him, charges leveled against him by the congregation that he was interfering with the young women in the congregation. And his defense was the worst defense of all. He said, "It wasn't me, it must have been another black man."
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how many black men were in attendance at that church, in 1818. But, he's a very interesting man anyway. But yeah.
I'll just a pause. I think maybe Lady Chelsea on that theme may have a question for you. Lady Chelsea.
Yeah, and I just want to know.
Morning, Lady Chelsea.
Good morning. I hope you're well. I just want to know about the African women's contribution to local history. Is there anyone notable that you could mention? Because I don't really know much about women, not really, put out there as much.
Yeah, but it's Sunday morning and my brain is
it's fine.
Saturday morning. Saturday morning.
Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah, the outstanding one is, of course, for me, Una Marston.
Okay.
Una Marston, who's actually been memorialized at Brunswick Gardens.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she lived in Brunswick Gardens, and if you look carefully, you can actually see the plaque to her. Now, why she is great is because she was the first, I believe, one of the first performed playwrights on the West End stage. She was, I think, one of the first broadcasters, if not the first broadcaster during the war as well. She was a central member of the League of Coloured People, Dr. Harold Moody's League of Coloured People. She actually lived with the Moody family at 164 Queens Road, Peckham, for a number of years before getting her own place. She was a supporter of Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, and their independence. She worked for Selassie's team when they were exiled in London. She was one of the early feminists, black or white. I'm talking international. Her view was international, global feminism, with black feminism at its core. She was so far ahead of her time. Also, she was outside of her time in the sense that if you read the poetry that she wrote when she was living in Peckham and Camberwell in the 1930s, poems like Kinky Hair Blues, where she's talking about the struggles with her hair, how her hair is seen, how her hair defines her. Kinky Hair Blues, and more tellingly, just one, excuse the language, I don't know what your policy is on language, but it's just nigger, they use the word, nigger. And that is a poem describing how the power of that word as it was used against her by children, by ordinary people, on the screen, on the stage, in the 1930s. And it really translates to this day. But yeah, she for me, she was one of the great unsung figures of history. And again, one of the reasons why I think all of these histories matter, because they were written down. We have records and we have letters, we have their writings, and it's a huge repository of information that we rather draw from North America or histories, which are all good and valid histories, but it means that we don't just draw on people who've been here and walked these streets before us. Why are we uncomfortable with that? And that's the other thing.
Other women? Can maybe one more, just keep us balanced. Any of the Fisk Jubilee singers who, I mentioned Mary Seacole, didn't I? Yeah. So any of the Fisk Jubilee singers who are performing at the Tabernacle in the 1860s and 70s. My memory's going to fail me this early in the morning. But so any of those characters who were very important in the fact that, for those of you who don't know, the Fisk Jubilee Singers were a group
of vocalists, black vocalists from the United States, who were bringing Negro spirituals, as they were called, you know, Sing Low, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Nobody Knows the Troubles I've Seen, etc., Deep River, for the first time to British ears. And they were in stark contrast to the normal appearance of black entertainers who were very much in the minstrel tradition, white entertainers as well in the minstrel tradition. And you had this very strong counter voice presented by many of these people who settled here as well. A lot of them didn't go back to America, the United States. They stayed and settled in this country.
Okay. I find what you're describing fascinating because, of course, it is not generally taught, you see. So it's there in plain sight, and the plant you just referred to, I know Brunswick Place, of course, very well, because it's a part of my political ward. And for heaven's sake, that I didn't know. So I will later today go have a look and take a picture of it. So thank you, Steve, for that. You mentioned your book earlier on, your books, I should say plural. Okay. Can you take us through those books and what are their themes and what are the key messages you'd like the reader to gain from those books? You know, I want to give them promotion if I can today. Go ahead.
So, Martin, the first book was Incomparable World, which is re-released last year. Was it earlier this year? I forget. Earlier this year. And that was looking at the years London in the year 1786, 1787, which is a time when you had a visible minority population here, a tangible minority population. Some say of 20,000. I just think even 11,000 to 14,000. It's a lot of black people and a much smaller London, experienced London. And I wanted to look at all of the themes of that time. I wanted to look at some of the political thinking, you know, people like Equiano and Cugoano pop into the book, some of the early thinkers. I wanted to look at just life from ordinary, uninformed people who are just trying to have as good a time as they can in, you know, this little suburb of hell that London must have been at the time. I just wanted to celebrate the whole roundness of life. And the grittiness of life, and the sort of the appeal of London as well. Why people came here, what is it that kept people here? But I wanted to look at, want people to engage with the fact that all of the things I was mentioning are things that we're still dealing with in some way, like the whole idea of repatriation, stupid word. You know, in this year, in that year I was looking at 1786, 87, you had 3 ships which were docked in Deptford, which was specifically to take away the black poor from the streets of London, and more than 300 of them were shipped out from the streets of London to Sierra Leone. Wow. Long story, complex story. But the other thing was, we often forget that this is a multiple story about people of African origin in these islands. It's not just people. We've now still under the insane delusion that it's a Caribbean story. But, you know, hence the Windrush fallacy. People from all over have always been here. All points of the diaspora and continental Africa have always been here. So I wanted to bring that point to the fore as well. And really just to annoy people, to wind people up is why I wrote it. You know, just because, again, I think a lot of people, some of them, you know, look like us, struggle with this idea of us as multiple or variable characters with variable settings. There's a great comfort, as I would say, in this constant reassurance that we're one kind of people in one kind of place, doing one kind of thing in one kind of way forever. You know, it's a warm gloom.
Yeah.
There's food there. There's food there. But I'm saying, you know, the menu is vast. So that's what that was about. What happened with that book is that my worst nightmare. I didn't want the book to end up where it did, which is on the coffee tables of Hampstead, because it just didn't get the marketing that it could have done, which Yeah, I'll take some of the blame for that. Anyway, so I moved into writing for young people.
Oh, right.
All of, my stories, this is my fiction. So the fiction then moved to young people, which is one of the big pluses of what I do, is getting young people engaged with where they live, because these stories can be told anywhere,
Great.
any part of London, anywhere there are public records, you can bring these people to life. And I brought up the African Academy, the African School,
Okay.
in Jupiter Williams, the second novel, which was based on real records of real people who were at school in Clapham in the early 1800s. There's a school for African boys and a smaller place for African girls in Battersea Rise.
And what was it called, you say?
The African Academy.
It was called the African Academy. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is your book, Juniper.
So Jupiter Williams.
Jupiter Williams. Okay. And Jupiter Williams is a character, or
Is a character based on factual people. On factual people. I mean, all of these young people were from Sierra Leone, that incredible society of Sierra Leone in the early 1800s, which was producing business people, artists, thinkers. It's just a cauldron of creativity. And as well as people who'd been there forever, traditional people, indigenous there, and they were sending their children to this school on Clapham Common North side, and then it moved down to Rectory Grove. And you see that they're the same families, the Smiths, the Thorpes, Nyambana, etc., who are still the ruling families of Sierra Leone today.
absolutely.
The very same
Check
names.
what you just said. Do you say moved to Bletchley Grove? Do you say?
Oh no, Rectory Grove.
Rectory Grove.
Rectory Grove,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. I know Rectory Grove. I know Bletchley Grove is in Southwark, you see, so
Oh, no.
that would have been fascinating.
But actually, I'll see what I've done. We've moved across the border now.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. That's okay. I didn't know there was a school referred to as the Africa School.
the African Academy, yeah,
The African Academy. Now that, I find that fascinating.
it is.
Truly fascinating. So let's come back to Southwark, and can you maybe refer to Africans who were members, part of the Charterists, part of that abolition of slavery movement? Can you refer to any?
Okay. Yeah. There's some very interesting histories there, because Chartism, for those of you who don't know, was the movement again in a period of early working class organizations. People being thrown off the land. You've got industrialization. You've got people really coming under the hammer of new forms of capitalism. They're suffering, and out of this comes the Chartist movement, which is basically the people who give us this the privileges that we enjoy if and when we go to vote. Basically a private ballot, a secret ballot. No one knows who you vote for. You don't need to own property to stand for parliament or to vote. One man, one vote. They weren't into women voting yet. Or very basic rights they were looking for. But they were revolutionary in 1848, which is when you see this mass gathering, huge demonstration on Kennington Common, now Kennington Park, 10th of April, 1848. They were all gathered there. There's actually one of the photograph, which for some reason people call it the world's first photograph of a crowd. I don't know how they quantify that, but if you just Google Chartist meeting Kennington, you'll see the photograph. And the herald, the steward of that march, was a man of African origin, born in Chatham, Kent.
Okay.
His father was from St. Kitts, and one of the many sailors that I go on about incessantly. And his mother was a local Kentish lass. Anyway, his name was William Coffey. Nearly 5 foot tall, a powerful speaker, hypnotic speaker, a tailor by trade, who ended up as the elected leader of the London Chartists, a member of the 5-man National Executive Chartist Committee. And when the Times wanted to disparage the Chartists or put them in a bad light, they referred to them as the black man and his party. And yeah, that was one of the nicer things, one of the nicer ways they described it. Yeah, they're being kind. And
Wow.
Coffee was in a terrible position that day, because there he was as one of the physical force Chartists. He was awful. Remember the years 1848, all over Europe, people are rising up, there's rebellions, there are threats to establish power. The authorities here were so scared, they sent out the royal family to the Isle of Wight. They brought in this sort of new militia of ordinary shopkeepers and bureaucrats and workers. It was a mess. They brought up the big guns from Woolwich Arsenal. They blocked off south from North London, the bridges and all the ferries and wherries. They put the city on lockdown.
Indeed.
The deal was that if the Chartists had gone over the bridge to the Houses of Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, to present their grievances, that would have been, in my opinion, the biggest civil, probably the largest loss of life in British domestic history. It would have been just utter chaos. Coffee was always pushing, to fight, to go for it, because there were lots of Irish people who had come over specially for this demonstration, and they hadn't come just to have a cup of tea and go home at all. They had grievances. But Coffee ended up having, he went underground after this demonstration, which didn't take place. It went in a smaller capacity. So Coffee went underground, and he was discovered some months later in a pub.
Oh, right.
Yeah, everyone was in a pub then.
Yeah.
He was discovered in a pub in Holborn. He ended up being transported to Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania, where he died, still busy organizing. But Coffee is the highest profile one. A month before Coffee's demonstration, there had been another one in which two black men and a gypsy had been identified as the leaders of that. And from that demonstration, it ended up being dispersed, and there's a long-running fight down the Walworth Road, through the back streets of Camberwell into Southampton, what's now Southampton Way. Some shops got broken up. But of course, the only people they arrested and charged as being organizers were the black
Yep, yeah, I'm aware of this one. Fascinating. This is fascinating history. Can you maybe sort of point to thinkers? When you mentioned Marcus Garvey and Mary Seacole. Other thinkers, people who maybe academics or thinkers that we should refer to, that would be found out in something called South London or indeed London. African people who were considered to be thinkers, can you refer to?
Yeah, well, okay, thank you for bringing it out to London, because I was struggling just to keep it to Southern. Some great people there. But the thing is, historically, London, as I was saying about Garvey, why he came here, London was the big attractor, because it was the heart of the empire, the belly of the beast, as I like to say. And this is where you had to come to get redress. This is where you also had to come to challenge the thinkers of the time and to be published. So from the earliest days, you have people like, Equiano, like Cugoano, and my favorite person, Robert Wedderburn, who are here. Now they're giving three completely different takes on battling enslavement.
Can I please forgive me? I know you written them up to the top of your tongue, and I'm familiar with those personalities. You might just want to say a little bit about each of those personalities to help the listeners. And I can see Lady Chelsea's nodding in affirmative. Okay, let's say just describe very quickly.
Okay, very quickly. 3 views on slavery from roughly broadly the same 50-year chunk, 40-year chunk. You've got Olaudah Equiano. A lot of people know about him. He gave us the first account of being transported as an enslaved object as a product across the Atlantic. He ends up here. He's bought his own freedom, and he publishes in 1789 the account of his life, his narrative, and his approach, his angle against enslavement is actually based in Christianity. That, you know, we are all one flesh in the body of Christ. No, my skin is black. I am washed white in the blood. I mean, I'm being crude and paraphrasing here. But he was just presenting himself as an equal by Holy Writ. And well, I'm not a religious person at all, but I have to concede that it worked to a degree because he became the identifiable face, the highest profile black thinker of that period. And he was a staunch activist, always out and about. And it made sense, according to the mindset of the time, to approach it that way. Then you have Ottobah Cugoano, also someone who was formerly enslaved, and he was working here as a free servant in London in Pall Mall. And I think he's a bit more interesting because he's presenting in his writings, which were published in 1787, he's presenting an economic argument. He is talking about the solution being African economic empowerment. He's talking about, in 1787, 20 years before the first trafficking bill, so-called abolition bill passed, he's talking about reparations.
Yes.
And he actually makes, the way he is talking about it makes sense. So he's bringing an economic argument. And then you have Robert Wedderburn, and he's living in central London in the early 1800s. And long story short, because I could bore anyone to tears about him, his argument is basically blood and fire. No mercy, no remorse. And he was a total revolutionary who went to jail on a number of occasions. But, you know, his position was that the authorities have to ready their hounds, get ready for the battle, because the winds that are blown across Haiti, you know, that after the Haitian Revolution, he was saying those winds are going to go throughout, those fires are going to go throughout the whole of the Caribbean. So get ready for a fight. Yes. He was publishing as well. Yeah. And he had a periodical that accelerated the route, which was being printed and sent out to the Caribbean to whip up the foment there. He was whipping up foment here amongst the working class people. He'd say things like, it is demeaning to human nature to petition one's oppressors. Yes. You know, he was not interested in kumbaya or marches or badges. He was just saying, he wasn't even interested in dialogue. It's demeaning to human nature to petition your oppressors. Basically, you can't ask for help from the people who have gone to your head. Indeed. So, but yeah, those are just three. But you also get people like Delaney, the early Pan-Africanists like Delaney, Theophilus Scholes, Celestine Edwards. There's a whole, but basically by enumerating them this way, what I'm trying to describe is this huge library of work that is available to draw on. This huge library of work that, you know, we overlook. Yes. You know.
Can I say, and you're right, we overlook it primarily because we're not taught it. Okay. Why I was particularly interested in your books, and particularly those which are aimed at young people. Okay. Because, you know, it's our history, and we have a responsibility to share that history with the next generation. You know? And we want to make sure that people like yourself are sufficiently resourced so you can continue to share our history. Okay. Now, so what is the future? Okay. Do you have, he says, apprentices, protégés who you are training to succeed you? Because, you know, I've got some grey hair. I can see you've got a few there. There you are. Let's tell us about succession to ensure that our history is remembered, is recorded by ourselves, and therefore the next generation will not be like a tree with very shallow roots. Please.
Yeah, I'm quite optimistic, cautiously optimistic, but optimistic because I do see a genuine hunger for these things, which is the root of everything that determines desire. So I see many more young people who are taking up the baton and who are organizing them also within the heritage sector, young Black people within the heritage sector who are doing this, and conversations as discrete groups who are all pushing this forward. I see heritage and interest groups, Black heritage and interest groups of all sorts, who have an investment in this.
Yes.
So I'm a lot more, I mean, okay, of course, there is still that core issue, which I think is within our remit, which is of looking for the external validation, you know. So if it is, you know, from North America, then it's the most authentic because it's the most seen. So there's always that issue, which is still has to be dealt with. But increasingly, I see people having a comfort level with this longevity of histories and the complexity of it, and the fact that it's interesting. I mean, you know, you've got people in the borough, like I'm saying, like Harold Moody, you know, who was this civil rights leader from Peckham, who preceded in his activities and the order and nature of his activities, Martin Luther King in the United States, about whom we know so much more, and is much more central to our sense of self than Dr. Moody or Una Marson.
So tell us, first of all, I'm going to appreciate your optimism, but of course, it's how do we materialize the optimism? What can the listeners do to help you to materialize that optimism that our history will be taught by ourselves, to ourselves, and indeed to the wider communities? What can we do to help you to deliver on that most crucial of agendas? Teaching of history, particularly history from our perspective, as opposed to other perspective. What can we do to help you?
To help me, or buy my books.
But
on a more realistic level, I'd say it's more about helping oneself, helping ourselves, and helping each other. Because I'm just flagging these things up. I am literally a motor mouth on these subjects. And what I'm trying to do is to just get people, firstly, to engage with where we live.
Indeed.
That this is nothing to do with, I always say, first having to go elsewhere. We don't first have to go to the Caribbean. We don't first have to go to the America. We can go to all of these places from where we are, because all of these people, all of these nationals were here.
Yes.
All of these histories were right here. So I say start from where you are. Look at your local surroundings. Look at who was baptized all over Southwark. You have people from all over the continental Africa who are living, from all over the Caribbean. And we're going back 500 years. You know, we are going way, way back. So we've got this huge palette to draw on. And also to get involved with local archives. This is a very, very, excuse me, Martin and Lady Chelsea, but I think this is a really important point. The local archives are dying because their usership is dying. The local archives being the regional, the local borough-wide record offices of who owns property, who lives where, who was baptized where, local newspapers, all sorts of records which on the surface you'd think are really boring and uninteresting, but they're not. This is the stuff of our lives. This is the stuff of our lives. So over the usual profile of the archive visitor is a white pensioner, is a white pensioner looking into their own histories. Fact, over the last 40, 45 years, the majority of information, a huge, not majority, close to a majority of the information being taken into local archives concerns communities, and I'm using this term for the sake of color, but particularly communities of African origin. All of this information can't be interpreted by anyone else. All of this interpretation isn't about anyone else. And we pay for this information to be stored and recorded. So we have to have an input in how it's used. And we see how we affect, you know, local history, local politics, local healthcare decisions, local health. That's our stuff. and we need to be involved in that. We need to
Tell us how.
engage.
Tell us how. Explain to
Join
listeners.
join the library, join the local join the library, and actually start using the local archives, who have realized, because they are on intubation at the moment, they know that they are losing visitors, and they need to substantiate for their own selfish reasons, as well as, you know, you obviously have some good people in there, but for their own selfish reasons, they need to ensure their longevity and value for their own funding.
Yes.
And the rise in non-white users, Black users as active elements in it is absolutely central. And also joining the National Archives, same story there. But of course, they've got more material to bandy with, but it's the same story there. So it's being familiar with this stuff and talking to other people about it. It's firstly, I'll just say, start the conversation. That's where it starts. Start the conversation and be informed about the conversation, because it is about you. Because if we're not describing ourselves, talking about ourselves, then of course other people will and can.
Will you be organising either a lecture tour or other sort of practical means of communicating these key messages, particularly historical messages, to the community in the near future?
Yes, I do intend to be having a talking about Southwark, hopefully a walking tour of Southwark in October, which is our Black History Month. Yes. But I'll be flagging up details of that if and when on my website, simartin.org.uk, or via my Twitter stream, which is really how I live in that netherworld, which is again at simartin.
Okay. Right, so you don't have a date as yet, okay, so please share that with us once you've solidified that. I'm assuming you've got all the funding in place to make sure it happens. That's already in place. Okay, that's all right, that's okay. Then my second question, okay, because I know that there are those who are listening to us right now who want to get involved, and you described the archive institutions, and of course the Black Archives in Brixton, of course, is a crucial one. I'm particularly interested in archive groups, of course, here in Southwark, this part of London, and I wonder, where would someone in Southwark go to seek out Black or African history in Southwark? Where would they go? Would they go to the African Centre maybe, or...?
No. Again, go to the archives, the Southwark Archives, which used to be at the John Harvard, but I believe they've now been brought up to, I haven't visited since the plague season, but I believe they've been brought up, as I said, to Walworth Road. And interestingly, over the last, 10 years or so, actively, over the last 4.5 years at least, the archives at Southwark have been active in looking through their Black histories, collating their Black histories, trying to make sense of it, because more people like myself are using those resources. And the wonderfully named Dr. Dark, Dr. Patricia Dark, at Southwark Heritage, as I call it, her mind is on that. She knows it's a thing, and increasingly, in common with a lot of museums, they know this is something which needs to be nurtured, succored, and aided along, because the information is there on one hand, the desire is there on the other. So yeah, there's a lot of information available at Southwark.
And if I may, I'm just conscious, Lady Chelsea, of course, you have reminded me that we should, of course, open the telephone lines shortly, imminently, in fact. But did we open the lines now? For those of you who are listening and want to engage our internationally renowned SI, or Steve Martin, local historian. And I want to keep on the historian, because that is the substance of our reparations campaign very often, I have to say, and it's a driver for change. Okay, so the number to call to engage this program is 0203 481 5240. I repeat, 0203 481 5240. You're asked, please, to enter a PIN number, and PIN number is 3707 33 43 97, followed by the ash sign, the vertical and horizontal symbol you'll find on your keypad. Okay. Now, if I may, Steve, just to follow through on this sort of practical engagement and how parents and others can engage, I asked about the sort of lecture tours, history tours, and that's great. And I've asked about your books, and you've given us a flavour of a number of them, which is great. Okay, what else do you have planned that will help parents to? Parents are not equipped to teach their children our history, particularly local history, British history. Help parents communicate these crucial messages to them. Our contribution to British history. What's your plan to fill that information gap?
Okay, I was, and I'm going to be frank here, for a short time involved with getting information into schools.
Okay.
I believe some shaped, let me use that euphemism, some shaped information will trickle down and is trickling down into schools. You know, people for various reasons know about Mary Seacole, Old Mother Seacole. They're beginning to know about Alauda Equiano.
Yes.
But the more engaging histories that we're talking about here, the local histories, the difficult histories, the histories which prompt questions, those I think should remain in our remit. They should be the stuff that we have to take absolute responsibility for and talk about. To that end, you know, obviously I do local tours. I do a boat trip with Black History Walks, a London River trip.
About that. Tell us about the boat.
Okay, so when we think about this city, we have to remember through the heart of it runs this great vein, the Thames. And all of our histories, most of our histories, especially those of Caribbean backgrounds, are tied up with this. Yeah. That's the reason why many of us are here at all. And more than 3,000 slaving voyages left from the banks of the Thames. We have to remember that it was up the Thames that the Windrush arrived in 48 at Tilbury. Yep. Long story short, along the banks of the Thames, by going down that stretch of water, you can see all of the stories from 1501 to 1948, from the arrival of John Blanc, the royal trumpeter, to Henry VII at Deptford in 1501, to the race riots, again in Deptford in 1948, and all of the stories which are all mostly around the sea, around the water, around the river, which is a huge part of our histories that we have, we still struggle to deal with it because it's so unfamiliar to our modern versions of who we are.
Is that recorded in one of your books? And it must be.
Excuse me?
In your books, do you record the African history in relation to the docks? And
oh yes. Particularly in the second of the Jupiter books, Jupiter Amidships, when I brought in the fact of basically young people's involvement, young Black people's involvement in going to sea, joining the Royal Navy. This was a way out of enslavement for a lot of people. One of the paths out of enslavement was just to run away to sea. The Navy, if you're fit enough, smart enough, they'd take you. It would also, for want of a much, much better word, give you some sort of possibility. Because of course, there's also nasty racism, freakish racism, but it would give you some possibility of a career trajectory. So you didn't just see Black cooks and Black landsmen at the lowest level. You saw a lot of Black petty officers up until 1811. You saw Black midshipmen and ship surgeons. You had a ship's captain, Captain John Perkins, with a majority white crew, in the late 1700s, early 1800s. There's some incredible stories, but lots and lots and lots of Black, thousands upon thousands of Black sailors, many of whom settled here. So all of these stories I try to introduce because that's a huge part of our presence. And a lot of these sailors as well produced writings like Equiano, sailor, Robert Wedderburn, sailor, William Davidson, sailor. You know?
Yes, yes. Thank you. We'll come back to you. Lady Chelsea, you may have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to know like how many black men and women in that field, and how, if a young person or somebody wanted to become a historian, if you know how they would do that. I think you said you did it in a non-conventional way, but do you have any?
Mine is very non-conventional. But nowadays there are entry paths into the heritage industry, the heritage field, because that gap is now known and it's measurable, and bodies of money. It's looked at very, very cynically, but it's seen as a necessary gap to fill. And there are entry strategies for non-white people into the museum industry. There are organizations like Museums Detox, which is a specific non-white organization of people who work in those fields at every level, whether it's at the management level or the visitor experience level, or the volunteer level. But it's this huge set of conversations which were not present when I was there. And also, people can go into archiving, because that is, you've got to go and study in Aberystwyth for 3+ years. But it's also a guaranteed way of getting work, because the demand is there, not just within the communities, but demand is there within the industry itself. And they know that they can't fill it.
Fascinating. Lady Chelsea?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, good.
Yeah,
That's okay. I want to make sure we've got that right. But it's fascinating, because of course, I'm receiving messages trying to encourage these people to call in. You must be making them very nervous there, Steve. I have no idea what's going on here.
It's early.
It's early, I suppose. All right. Never mind. But anyway, is it interesting? I've been asked a question here. Someone who lives in Southwark has asked, give dates out and location, and are you aware that we're going to have a Africa Day next Saturday? I don't know if you were invited. Were you aware we're going to have an Africa Day in Woolworth next Saturday? You weren't aware of that?
A, I wasn't aware, but B, my full disclosure, unmasking. I'm actually straddling the border.
Yes.
I'm on Cold Harbour Lane, where it meets where the two boroughs join, and I was for more than a decade and a half a resident of beautiful Southwark. No, I'm no longer in. But I didn't know that. I'd be interested to know what that was about as well.
Yes. I'll get that person to call in, would be nice, wouldn't it? There we go. But anyway, there's more details. I'll come back to that in a second. And then there's the follow-up question to that. It'd be useful to know: are you satisfied that black people, African people's contribution to the history of Southwark have been fully recognised, either through the blue plaque system, and if not, can you list out those names that you believe Southwark Council should recognise as being black peoples who have made a contribution to the rich history of Southwark?
That's a really good question. The answer is no, obviously. Those histories haven't been recognised because, again, full disclosure, I sit on a plaque committee, a minorities plaque committee for English heritage. And we look at this really, really closely. One of the problems is...
Can I ask you just to pause this for a moment? I've got a caller. I shouldn't keep him waiting. It's got a little time. Caller with number ending 9972. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Lovely, bright voice. Can I ask you your name, please? Oh, is this Elder Norma?
Yes, it is.
Oh, good morning, Elder Norma. Good morning to you. How are you this fine morning?
I'm fine, thank you. No different from yesterday and probably no different to tomorrow.
There you go.
I'm fine.
There you are. That's maturity for you. Now, Elder Norma, you have a question for Steve Martin.
Yes, yes, I got just a couple. Steve, we've met before on a couple of occasions. I've done a couple of your walks.
Ah.
And Yes, I have. I've done 3, I think, over the years.
Oh,
There you go.
And yes, I have. And I remember the very first one, because that was my very first walk with anyone. Never done one. From the Warwood Town Hall.
yes,
And part of the walk took through Manor Place,
that's right.
Paisley Park,
Mhm.
Kennington Park,
Yes,
across the road to Brixton,
you're taking notes.
where that church, where that
St.
church
Mark's.
is, and we went in that churchyard there.
Yes, that's
Yeah?
right. Mm.
The next one I can remember is Elephant and Castle,
Yes.
history tour of the theatres. Yeah.
Mm. Yes.
Also, Newton Causeway to Dr. Byfield Clark,
Yes.
the GP. That was in Newton Causeway. Not many people in Warwick know that there was a GP there. We all think of the one from Peckham in Canberra,
That's right.
but there was one at Newton Causeway. And I found that were very interesting. Mind you, I'm going to say no disrespect, but my very first one, I nearly changed my mind halfway because it was new to me, and I didn't realize you had actors that played some of the parts.
Yes, right.
Oh.
That's right, yes. And it was a time when mental issue was something you kept in the cupboard.
Mm.
And because we live near to the Moseley, yes, a lot of people are out. And then this man jumped out of somewhere to recite something. And I wasn't sure he was part of the tour, right? And I asked myself then, what have I got myself into? Imagine us camping a walk with mad people.
Yeah.
But I didn't change my mind. I continued till we get to Paisley Park, and we had all the information you gave there, plus the one at the Elephant. So your tours are very interesting. I've done a couple of your talks also in the Warwood Town Hall as well. Over the years, you've done some of those. Lots of people don't realise, I mean, my voice might sound to you like, not to you, but to listeners who have never seen me, as probably a younger person, but I normally be the oldest one probably on your tours.
We don't crack, Elder Norma. We don't crack.
Pardon?
Don't worry. Don't worry. But Elder Norma, do you have a question for Steve? Just to keep that.
Yes. What is the? Yes. Is the? Yeah. Well, yes, there is. There is. We are looking for a lady called Lillian Jarvis. Right. Let me tell you why, Steve. And you're an historian. You might be able to find it. And Martin, you can put this on your program because you've been asked before. She was the founder of the Golden Oldies in Canberra. Nobody has any background information on this lady who started the Golden Oldies. She's still going. The Golden Oldies is used by all historians, lots of them, even people writing books now. She's mentioning it, but nobody done any history of finding who this lady is.
Okay.
So I've given as much information that I knew about her because she ran this group 50 yards from my house. That was in about 1990, 91. But that's all I knew. But she does exist. She did exist. But no records were kept. But it's just that as an historian and other people out there might know who this lady is. I don't know if you want me to give anything else more, Martin, on this matter.
No, it's interesting. Of course, Golden Oldies I know very well, currently led by Russell Prophet, and they're based currently, were based in the Methodist church on the Wharf Road. That's right, isn't it, Elder Norma?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But what I'm saying is, I think even this morning, I looked on the internet this morning, and I see about 3 or 4 different people have written stories about it and the lady, but no one has done the research. So there's nothing to be written of where she came from, how she started the group, why she, 100 years' time, you'll be seeing the same story. Lillian Francis started the Golden Oldies, but nobody knows anything.
Sorry, Norma.
Yeah?
Norma, did you say Lillian Francis or Jarvis?
Lillian Francis. So if you look up the Golden Oldies Southwark, you'll see it actually says it there. It was started by the Reverend Lillian Francis in 1991. I'm afraid that's all you're going to find because that's all it seems to be. Nobody knows anymore. Now, I can give you this much. She started it on the Haygate Estate in the TRA Hall.
Okay.
I know that for a fact.
Okay.
That's right. She started it there, and I know that for a fact. And when she retired, she realized there was no way for people of a certain age to sit down and chat and with each other or whatever. So she took the TRA Hall, and she used to provide a small meal there, so older people would go there. I didn't go there. I lived 50 years. I was too young at the time to go there, I must say, so I didn't. Then she moved to where they are now because the kitchen on the A-gate was not suitable on the health and safety standard. It was just coming in health and safety, so they moved to where they are. But that's all that's known.
Okay.
And I think this should actually go in the record, but we can't keep saying it was started by Lillian Francis and nobody knows who she is.
I hear you. That's a really interesting contribution, Elder Norma, and I believe you've piqued Steve's interest.
Yeah, because I mean, she'd have left a broad trail, I'm thinking, not just within local authority records, if they had any local authority funding or assistance, but also the Methodist Church's records. And I don't know which denomination she belonged to, but
nobody knows. This is the point.
Yeah,
that's all. If you look up, if you look up the Golden Oldie, all it would tell you is that it started by the Reverend Lillian Francis, and even the people who run it now have no idea who she is. And most of the people there, they're dying out because they're very elderly people. Most of the people they can't remember when it started, but I know for a fact, and I probably won't be around long enough to tell the full story again, that it was on the A-gate. 50 yards from my house. She was doing something in there. I was never part of the group, but I know she exists.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you. But as I said, that's it. It doesn't go any further.
No, that's brilliant contribution, Elder Norma.
So that is my contribution.
I know that's
and Martin, please remember to mention our African Day next Saturday while you're there, in case you forget.
I mentioned it very briefly. I've just mentioned it, but I'm trying to remember where it's going to be located. Is it going to be in the? Where is it going to be?
In the St. Peter's Church Yard.
Forgive me, in St. Peter's Church Yard.
Yes.
Which is just off the Warwolf Road.
Warwolf Road, Liverpool Grove, or you probably come around the back from Liverpool Grove, St. Peter's Church Yard. So and by the way, I should tell Steve, your friend will be there. Julia will be there.
Yeah. Here you are. Oh, right. Okay.
It's friend Julia. Okay, we got strings, you see. We can pull. We know your friend. I think she's listening at the moment because I told her you're on. Yeah. So she'll probably be listening.
Okay.
Julia Hornis?
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, she's probably listening now.
Okay.
Okay, that's my contribution.
Thank you very much, Elder Norma. That was very, very helpful contribution, and I believe you've now got Steve on the lookout now for useful information about this.
When did Steve say his next walk will be? I said something in October.
Yeah.
Well, there's an earlier. I'm thinking off the top of my head. I've got a number of a couple of boat trips. I think one is on the 3rd of October.
Oh, right.
Boat trip. Yeah.
Well, if you get those details to me, Steve, I will promote that trip on our future show. Okay, but get that information to me. That will be an action that follows on from the show. And of course, you've now got an interesting piece of work to do, the founder of the Golden Elders. And just to be clear for those who are listening, the Golden Elders is essentially a group that is responding to the needs primarily of Caribbean and African elders in the community and ensuring that those elders are able to enjoy environments that remind them of the Caribbean or Africa and ensuring that they eat food that we would traditionally eat from that part of the world. And currently led by Russell Prophet. And I must say, I'm not wearing a hat, but I'll take my hat off to Russell for ensuring that the Golden Oldies group continues. Very similar to another group, the Black Elderly Group in Peckham, led by former councillor and former Mayor of Southwark, former councillor Bob Albin Graham. And both organisations continue to exist. We, the community, have to ensure that those individuals who are currently leading those groups, there is succession. Okay? So they continue to serve the community in future generations. Okay, so that's why I'm very interested in Steve's work and ensuring that Steve has got his acolytes, his apprenticeships, and so on. That there's succession. You know, this history is so vital to our very existence. You have far too many young people who say that they've got no history, got no identity. And that's our failure as a community, not the wider community. It's our failure as a community. So I want to encourage people to take note of what has been said by Steve today. Go to his website. And Steve, just repeat your website address, please.
simartin.org.uk.
And your Facebook, please.
Facebook, you just look at SI Martin.
SI Martin.
But Twitter, which is how I normally interact, is at SIA Martin. Yeah, all one word.
Martin, can I say one more thing? Sorry.
Of course.
What people need to do is go to the library and ask for these things and demand them.
Yeah.
Go to the library, the Heritage Centre, the library got heritage centres. Our money pays to keep these things going. Go into the library and ask for something. And if it's not there, ask why.
Absolutely. So, that library...
suggest that they get it.
Of course, that library is in my ward. That's why it's so important to point out. I'm going to make sure that we do have a Black History event in that library. And Steve, you most certainly, assuming you've not been fully booked up as yet in October, most certainly want to get you in there to provide that account of our history here in Southwark. And indeed, well done. Thank you.
Be my pleasure.
Norma, I'm going to say thank you very much. And this conference, I've just been reminded of the time, so at 9:58. Thank you. Steve, thank you, Norma. Steve, do you want to say your maybe 30 seconds just to give a final summary of a key message you'd like the audience to receive from you?
Okay, very briefly. I mean, we've been pottering around Southwark, looking at the stories of higher profile people, I would say. But I'd still emphasize and re-stress that a lot of the more interesting stories are just about ordinary people who survived, ordinary people who managed to have lives of dignity, and the everyday. There's a huge amount of magic in there. In fact, often more, less compromised magic than in the lives of the great and the good. So, and it's also that these histories are absolutely everywhere. We're tripping over it. Also, one final thing, please, all of the writers I'm talking about, Equiano, Wedderburn, Cugoano, their writings are now free, out of copyright. You can download them, walk around with them on our mobile devices. Everyone should have access to them.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're going to have you back again because I want to get a few. We want to focus on those less known personalities who are vital to the history of Southwark, of London, indeed of our peoples in this country. So I'm definitely going to have you back again if you don't mind. But we definitely need to get you into the Wharf Heritage Centre, and you need to make a presentation during Black History Month in October. I'm going to make sure that happens as a further action. And please, if you're able to come along to the Africa Day at the St. Peter's, just off the Wharf Road, Liverpool Grove, please feel welcome to come along to the Africa Day. I think I'm about to close now. Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much for attending today. Very informative. Actions speak louder than words. Good day to you. Good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Lady Chelsea?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, bye.
We're now going out. Steve, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Nice, Lady Chelsea. Bye.
Okay, thank you, bye.
Wow.
I know it ain't easy.
Take care.
Bye.
But hang on.